The pass from Havili was magic. The shift on for Crotty. Boom, far down you go, Quackett Smith.
Me, oh my, I have enjoyed that. Yes, boy.
Sit back, relax, put your belt on, enjoy.
Draft Rugby, the game they play online in heaven.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Australian Rugby Royal Rumble Round 4. I'm your host, Ando. With me is Matt from Gold Digger Rugby.
Hello.
Harry and Nelson from Draft Rugby.
Ahoy, how's it going?
And we got Mitch as well, obviously from Pick and Drive Rugby.
G'day.
And we're hoping beyond hope that Rev from Rugby Fixation will be able to join us. He's currently in the midst of Babytown, and he may or may not be able to make it in a little bit later. But we are incredibly excited to be here with you tonight or today, depending upon when you are listening, to chat all things Super Rugby Pacific and to cheer on the Wallabies this weekend. If you're listening on audio, then just know that we are all wearing our Wallabies gear and Wallabies gear as well, Mitch. Well done. To cheer them on and kind of wish our team the best. So we've got a few things that we just wanted to get a bit of an update on. And I think most importantly, Matt, we're going to throw it over to you. We have been waiting for a long time, but a good long time. The anticipation is growing. The excitement is growing. Gold Digger, search for Australian rugby. When are we going to be able to see it?
Yeah, look, it's a great question and one I keep asking myself just about every other week, or at least asking my distributor. Look, finally, we do have some clarity. It is going to be in September of this year. I'm going to make a formal announcement in probably just under a couple of weeks where we'll give all the full details, where people can watch it. And that's in Australia. It'll be available. Other countries are hopefully going to get releases. But yeah, the film distribution is a tricky beast, and it has taken a while to get this point. I would have loved it to be out earlier, but I guess in many ways, with the season now really taking shape with the Wallabies about to play, it seems like a nice time to actually probably release it. So hopefully it fits in nicely in between maybe the England series and before the Bledisloe starts.
That sounds very exciting. I mean, it did get released in South Africa, yes?
It did, yeah. We had a release there on SABC, which was great. It was funny getting a bit of reactions from people in South Africa, and funnily enough, there wasn't too many spoilers or things coming out. I don't know, maybe it didn't quite sort of catch the crowd on Anzac weekend in South Africa.
Well, either way, mate, we are stoked and cannot wait to go to what is going to be one of the hottest red carpets in town in that early September release, without a shadow of a doubt.
Gold carpet, surely.
Gold carpet, yeah, very good point. Dales, you are the trailblazers of fantasy rugby within the Australian rugby circles. So can you give us an update? Who made it to the finals this year of your competition, and who took out the win? Nelson, do you want to talk?
Yeah, mate. Look, I had a trailblazing year right throughout the year, led basically all the way through. And then, I don't know if you guys play Mario Kart when you're really far behind and you just get the bullet and it takes you to the front. And yeah, so someone scraped past and got the win. But I mean, I won most of the year. That's all that counts. So
who's got the name on a trophy, Harry?
No one currently.
It's the same name that's there pretty much every year. It's Harrison Dale once again with his 5th title.
How exciting. Well, congratulations to both of you. I guess one of you won when it counts, so well done. There's got
to be an inquiry, Nelson. Like this is too. Does lightning strike twice year after year?
I do the scores, and I can assure you there's nothing sus.
5 years running. Has there been any breakdancing or?
No, look,
I've still got to learn, mate. It takes me more than 5 years to get those.
No worms going across the living room.
He cannot dance.
Oh,
the only thing he can do is actually pick a fantasy footy side, unfortunately.
Unfortunately for you, that's the case, yeah. Now, Mitch, you and I had our first experience and taste of fantasy rugby ever for this year. And what was your kind of takeaway? What was your experience like of this format? And what can you kind of share with your adoring crowds who might be trying to get into fantasy rugby moving forward?
Yeah, I think just we're very big rugby fans, so it's easy for us to watch all 6 games or whatever it is a weekend and find something to be happy with. But for the fans who maybe watch their team and don't watch the other ones, fantasy is a great outlet to get you involved in all the games because you've got players actually playing and they're getting you real life scores. So it definitely gives you that different element. I've done tipping for a few years, and tipping's great because you sort of want them to get the win for your tipping points. But I found fantasy just engages you that little bit more when one of your players makes a break or gets a try, particularly if they're a prop, you're the one up and dancing around the living room, and your family's wondering why you're cheering for a Crusader who just scored.
Yeah, I found myself getting irrationally angry at some of my strike outside backs when they went in to provide like ruck cover. I'm like, no, get out, receive the ball, make the break. What are you doing getting in and doing that dirty work?
Just run.
Your in-depth understanding of every player and what they need to do to get your points is far superior after having a season of this. You know, like you look out for a certain winger just because you know he hogs it more rather than passes it. That's what you learn year 2. I reckon that's what you'll be thinking.
Your opinion of a ball hog completely switches. All of a sudden, they're your favourite player.
Yeah.
Well, it's finally got me actually watching and caring about the New Zealand teams. Lester Fainga and Nuku is just my boy, and Kurt Eklund can do no wrong in my eyes. So those two are just legends. But ladies and gentlemen, why don't we move on from our fantasy chat and actually get into the main course, as it were, for this evening, which will be the Super Rugby Pacific. Now that it's wrapped up, we want to do a bit of a discussion of how the season went, some of our suggestions or ideas for what the competition may look like in the future, particularly in light of Hamish McLennan's fairly controversial takes over the last fortnight or so. What we're going to start with, though, is a bit of a review of the competition as a whole. So obviously the Crusaders and the Blues fought out a final, and the Crusaders took it away yet again. I'm just going to put it out there. Is anybody else getting that feeling that Razor Robinson's breakdancing is pretty cringe, or are we pretty happy about it?
Look, I think if you just keep winning, you just keep dancing. He's had plenty of time to come up with some new dance moves, but he just knows he doesn't need to, because if you keep winning, anyone that complains about it, you know, that's on them. He's a leader, he's a winner, he can keep doing it all he wants.
You just show him a trophy and say, just look at the trophy. That's it.
Yeah.
All right.
I feel like if he was any decent at it, it would actually it'd be too cringe.
Yeah.
It's like he's then put effort into it in the off season, which actually suggests the whole level of cringe. I like the fact that it's like that daggy uncle that always gets drunk every Christmas and does the same dance. It's a nice little pleasant staple, even though I don't want the Crusaders to be winning every year. There is something charming about it.
I completely agree. I love it. And it would be quite arrogant if he learned new moves, because it means that he expected to dance again. I think every year he's like, didn't expect this, better pull out the dance moves again. I reckon it's good. It just shows his personality. I don't know why. People wouldn't be so upset if he didn't do it 6 years in a row.
Yeah, he should be thanking that in the second year he didn't do different dance moves and then had to keep coming up with new ones. Like, thank goodness he just picked and stuck to the same moves.
Look, this is the type of chat that we're here for within this breakdown of the Super Rugby Pacific competition, Razor Robinson's dance moves. Now, let's move across to the Australian sides. And what we're looking to do is have a bit of a discussion around whether or not the teams exceeded expectations, they met expectations, or they underperformed. So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. You've got the view from overseas, currently being based in England. Let's start from the top of the table. Actually, no. I'm just going to give it to you and say, which team do you think exceeded, met, or underperformed that you really wanted to talk about and get into first?
Look, obviously, I'd like to talk about the Force because that's who I sort of usually barrack for and focus on. But I think if there was a team that improved the most, it has to be the Tars. They stood out. They overperformed in my life for my end, but maybe they didn't. Maybe I wasn't looking as closely as some of their results and players' potential could have done. They definitely, I think, kind of brought everyone back into loving the Tars, and I think it certainly had an effect on the rest of the competition because it, you know, made it a lot harder for the Force and Rebels to get that sort of hallowed third place after the Brumbies and Reds. But like across the board, I mean, I've sort of done the out of 10, and for me, the teams that I'd say really only the Tars and Brumbies get a pass mark for me this year. The rest are all sort of a bit of a thumbs down just because they either regressed or they didn't achieve the potential they could.
Now, we are going to go through and do a score out of 10 for each of the teams, but with the Waratahs striked off the ledger early and the only 4 remaining contestants here being Waratahs fans, I'm going to throw it across to Mitch and ask, mate, which team do you want to talk about next?
I think we'll go with the Brumbies and just talk about how I think for me, it's probably a little bit hard to say they overachieved because I think for the last few years, the Brumbies have been the benchmark for Australian rugby, that we all expect them to perform well. and they went so far and got so close. I don't think we were all expecting them really to push the Blues as far as they did in that semi-final. But realistically, they could have won it. They could have won that game, and if it weren't for a few calls that didn't go their way, and then they're playing the grand final against the Crusaders. And if that were the case, I think we're all giving them a 15 out of 10 as an expectation, that no one really saw an Australian team getting that far. But they didn't, and I think we're probably sitting, for me personally, around a 7 or an 8.
Yep. Okay. So basically, we're saying that they're one penalty away, really, from getting into that final. Luke Reimer's just got to be reliving that moment and just seeing Ben O'Keefe just staring at him on the edge of that ruck time and time again. Let's go, Nelson. You're next, mate. Who do you want to talk about? 2 teams down.
And I'll talk about the Reds. They're a hard one to assess because they had two seasons, I reckon, this year, and you can rate them both very differently. I ended up giving them a 5.5. I ummed and ahed between a 5 and a 6. I've given them just over a pass because I think they were very, very good in the first half of the season. Not good enough to get higher than this, but they were very good, leading the way in the Australian sides at the AU to Trans-Tasman sort of crossover. But that back end of the season, and they just fell apart, being the only Aussie team to not get a win against the Kiwis, albeit with a lot of injuries, a lot of key injuries. And I think the thing out of that shown that they don't have the depth that we've thought they have been building. So I have given them just over a pass, but they've scraped through by the skin of their teeth.
Yep. Thank you for that, Harry.
The Western Force, man, I feel like, they're always probably not the tip of everyone's tongues, but I think they're a big story this year. I think we were expecting a hell of a lot more from them than what we saw. They came third in Super Rugby AU last year, and they were, I think, the most competitive side when it came to playing the Kiwis last year. They were so close every single week. I think the most consistent of all the Aussies. And I was hopeful pre-season that the Waratahs were going to come good. So but I was realistically expecting the Force to be the third best Aussie side, to probably take another step forward. I thought they'd made some good signings to kind of bolster the depth in their team. And I thought they were really underwhelming. I thought particularly once they made the announcement that their head coach had been let go, they seemed to lose any motivation to stay in games, albeit with the exception of the last game of the year. I thought they were the real disappointment for the year, to be honest. I expected a lot more, and it probably is reflected in, the fact that none of them are in the Wallabies squad. So it's disappointing for their side.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because I think you could very easily talk about the Rebels and the poor quality of their season, but we didn't expect as much from the Rebels comparative to the Force. The Rebels were without a doubt the weakest team in terms of previous performance, and combined with playing roster that really lacks some depth in key areas too. And then the Force just didn't seem to be able to, with the announcement of Simon Cron coming in, continue any of their form, whereas the Rebels in a way started the season off incredibly poor, had Carter Gordon at 10, which is what everybody had been shouting for, and then when he had kind of one average game or a couple of average games, subbed him out for Matt Tuamua.
It was one, wasn't it? That
was it just
game?
one?
Round 2,
yeah.
I think they made that change,
Yeah, and then it was only when Matt Tuamua had a concussion that forced them to bring Carter Gordon back in, and then their season began to improve with Tuamua outside him at 12, which is what all the kind of average pundits like us have been shouting for and saying, and it seems that Kevin Foote finally listened. So in terms of the Rebels, I'd be, if we're giving them a rating, and I'll quickly go through and get you guys to give your teams a rating one more time. I personally, for the Rebels, would be saying about a 4, but 4 out of 10, just because they had some improvements near the end of the season.
But they beat 2 Kiwi sides. That's surely got to give them some extra points when the Reds hadn't done.
There were 1 before that, so
yes, they were very low down in my rankings.
You were negative figures before that. For you.
Exactly. So let's just quickly go back to Matt. You were saying, what was your ranking for the Waratahs?
My ranking for the Tars is 6 out of 10. I thought it was a pass, but sort of still plenty of room for improvement.
It's a bit harsh.
If we're going to talk like school children, school teachers. Oh yeah, 12 out of 10. No, 6 out of 10. I thought you summed it up nicely before.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I went to Mitch next.
For the Brumbies?
Yep.
I think I said 7 or 8.
Okay, cool.
We'll go with 8.
So let's go
We'll go with
7.5. Oh, 8, done.
We'll go with
All right, and
Round it up.
Nelson, you already gave your 5.5 for the Reds, I believe.
Correct.
And then for the Force, Harry?
For the Force, I want a 2 out of 10.
You're a harsh marker, my friends, but it's
That's
deserved. Quite deserved. So when we're looking ahead then, it is really helpful at this point to reflect back on the competition. And this year was special in terms of the inclusion of the 2 new Pacifica teams in Moana Pacifica and the Fijian Drua. And they added so much to the competition, particularly when they had the opportunity in the second half of the season to be playing some games at home. We saw a level of crowd engagement and passion, which the competition has honestly just been lacking for the last few years, really. And let's start off with you, Matt. Going back to you, what was your takeaway of the inclusion of these 2 new Pacifica teams? What did they add to it, and what are you looking forward to with their inclusion moving forward?
They added a real nice, obviously, diversity of play. The way that the Fijians have a style. I think the Samoan Manu Samoa team, it sort of had that. I don't know. There was something about it with Christian Leofano in it. Really made it nice. I felt he was playing in a different way that I'd seen him play in that structured Brumbies. He was obviously influenced by the players around him. Watching all these games from the UK, what I loved about the competition, we might discuss this later when we talk about future plans, was I'd get up on a Friday morning, make breakfast and watch games and do the same thing Saturday, and if there was a game Sunday. So for me, it was really easy to follow the competition and watch most of the games because, you basically just had a 3-4 hour window every week at the regular time, and the old Super Rugby days of sort of having to move around and shift your calendar just weren't even a thing. And to have to see different teams from different parts of the Pacific play each other, it was just a real treat. We haven't really ever experienced that, so I actually thoroughly enjoyed it, despite the Australian teams perhaps not doing as well as I would have hoped. I thoroughly enjoyed the competition for what it was.
Dales, is that similar for you?
Yeah, look, I think they really gave a breath of new life into Super Rugby. We've talked about it for so long, hoping to get some Pacific sides into the competition. They've given so much to Super Rugby. They've given so much to international rugby over the history of rugby. So it was about time that we saw them included, and I think they had both sides an outstanding year. Very, very different in terms of how they built into the year. The Ndrua, lots of boys from the islands, giving them a lot of chances, and a lot of those guys working their way into the actual Fijian, flying Fijian squad. And then for Moana, they had this combination of, Kiwis with that sort of Pacific heritage and some old boys that, were very experienced. So they both were very different in how they built their squads, but they were both very entertaining and, played that Pacific sort of brand of footy, exciting, fast, big hits, really threatened the top teams at parts throughout the year. So they were great inclusion, I reckon.
I think it's fair to say for both teams to enter that competition and walk away with at least 1 or 2 wins, I think, but they both got a couple of wins. That's a pretty massive effort, really. Because it's not a easy competition to, and one of those wins came from Kiwi team,
the Hurricanes,
of Moana. So huge effort, really.
It was. I think they massively overachieved. I think they were arguably the most fun teams to watch in the entire competition. And the other thing that really resonates with me is Moana Pacifica, when they picked that side, I thought this is the 6th New Zealand Super Rugby team, and it's the bunch of the Kiwi players, or, obviously Islander heritage Kiwi players that haven't made it yet, and this is going to be their way of trying to get a contract for a New Zealand side. And then come the end of the season, I think it's 13, don't quote me exactly, but I think it's 13 players in the Samoan squad and 13 players in the Tongan squad. So how much that has actually, I guess, meant to them and the pathway that it has created for the Samoan and Tongan players, and obviously for the Ndrua side as well. It's fantastic, and I guess it's the perfect result, the perfect way to end what is a fantastic debut Super Rugby season for both sides.
And I think one thing that often gets overlooked, if we look back on this season, there's got to be an asterisk put against this Moana team, because out of everyone in the competition, they had the most disrupted preparation. They've a new team that came together in November last year, a few months of time together as a team, gelling and pre-season before they're into the comp. And then was it 5 or 6 games that they had throughout the season cancelled and shoved together with 3 games in the space of a week? It's just crazy to think that they didn't really get the consistency of selection and turnover that some of the other super sides did really get. And I think we saw that. And the fact that they went on to beat the Hurricanes and then the Brumbies in their last game of the year, 2 massive victories for them. And you could see that in the players and the coaching staff when they got those victories. But massive year coming up next year. I think if we can hopefully get a good prep for Moana and get an undisrupted season for them, there's no reason why they can't be up there pushing for the playoffs.
We need more games for that Nduru at home because, boy, those crowds look wild.
Yeah. Don't you just love seeing people in trees and on nearby rooftops like that? That's just what you love to see. Yeah. And I mean, that takes us really easily into kind of the next point that we wanted to talk about, which was what our expectations are for 2023, knowing that that's where our current kind of broadcasting partnership deal is taking us up to the end of next season. What are we hoping for within the competition, and what are some of the ideas for improvement moving forward? I'll throw this one to Harry first because I've picked on Matt the last couple of times. Harry, what are some of the ideas that you think we can be looking forward to or moving forward with Super Rugby Pacific next year?
Well, the first one's obviously an Aussie winner. That'd be a great start.
That'd be great. Let's lock it in now.
If we move on from that, I think what we missed out on this year was the cross-contamination of the Aussies and the Kiwis from the very beginning of the tournament. I don't mind the Super Rugby AU and Aotearoa start, but I think it will be really good for all the sides to have a mix of Aussie and Kiwi sides throughout the season, which might change, I guess, the intensity of the run of some of those games. And I think that's going to make a big difference. And as Nelson said, I think some home games for the 2 new sides as well is going to be a huge draw. So that's probably the 2 things I'm crossing my fingers for.
Yep. Mitch?
Like Harry was saying, I think it's always going to be different to kind of see how the Australian teams cope with that back and forth full integration of Super Rugby, like we've seen in the last few years. Well, in its old form, we haven't in the last few years had that 1 week New Zealand team, 1 week back to Australia, and see if that can actually change some of the preparation for these teams, but also the way that they build their season. So, very much shadowing his thoughts in that one. I guess, are we talking about the future post 2023 or are we looking immediately at 2023?
Just 2023. Nelson, you wanted to jump in there, mate?
Yeah, look, I think one of the big things with how it's, I love the idea of having a Super AU if it is that, but to go all the Aussie games, and then by the time the Reds got to the Kiwi matches, they had all these injuries. And that was against all the Kiwis. Like, with some of those injuries, they probably would have got a couple of wins against Aussie sides, and their season could have looked very different if all those injuries weren't there against Kiwis. So I think it's a fairer reflection of a season if you are crossing over right the way through. One injury doesn't mean, you're missing those players against all the top sides. It might be against, a lesser side 1 week and a better side the next week, and it's just the luck of the draw. And
I guess the other flip side of that argument is that the Reds would be saying that this year, through their successful AU championship, they made the playoffs. And if they didn't have that good run of form and got those points early in the season, by the time they got to Trans-Tasman, they didn't win any games, yet they still made the top 8. So it didn't help them when they played the Crusaders 2 weeks and then got kicked out. But we might have seen, alternatively, if it was sort of interspersed, that they wouldn't have even made the top 8 if they're falling away in that last half.
To be honest, I don't see it going that way. I think they would have been pressing the lesser Kiwi sides a lot more earlier on in the season, and I still think they would have beaten the Rebels. They would have, with their injuries of those top sides. So it can go both. It can go both ways for sure. But that confidence
they were quite bad.
Significantly when it was week after week with those missing players against the top sides.
Yeah, and having to bring in someone like Lawson or Hudson Crichton, I always forget there are 2 of them. Lawson, Crichton, to come up against Kiwi teams week after week. It's so hard for a player to be able to step up in that type of environment. Whereas if they're playing some of the honestly just weaker Australian teams, it gives him an easier stepping stone into Super Rugby as an experience. But One of the really key things that's come out in the last couple of weeks has been some pretty inflammatory comments by Hamish McLennan, the Rugby Australia chairman, who has spoken publicly about the fact that in the new kind of broadcast negotiations that are going to be happening in regards to the 2024 broadcast deal, that all options are on the table. It's a clean sheet of paper, that they might consider a domestic solution to Australian rugby, that they might just cut themselves adrift of New Zealand rugby. Now, there's an element to which I think this was deliberately inflammatory. It must be said that it's not like this news was delivered by media first. It was announced in person and discussed in person at dinner between the respective heads of kind of New Zealand rugby and Australian rugby. But Matt, I wanted to start with you. When you heard this information that came out here in terms of Hamish McLennan kind of maybe putting a boot in a little bit to New Zealand rugby, did you kind of stand up and go, yeah, somebody standing up for Australian rugby? Or are you just responding with a, hey, what are you doing? We don't need this type of chat out in the public.
Yeah, look, I want to know what sort of drugs they're smoking down at Moore Park, because I just think it's absolutely, I think it's lunacy, to tell you the truth. I take the fair enough that you want to negotiate as best as you can for Australian rugby, and that no one would sort of begrudge them. I'm sure the Kiwis wouldn't. Why you want to play this out in the public when we've seen what public controversies do, and playing a game of chicken against New Zealand when, yes, we have money and a future windfall now, but they are obviously far more valued than us by broadcasters. They have a private equity partner that's just come in and is going to be boosting whatever plans they intend to make. And we've just started, for goodness sakes, we're only one season into this new competition, which I think we've all agreed is a breath of fresh air, and certainly is probably the best chance this region, and when I say this region, Australian, Pacific, New Zealand region, has of creating a competition that can stand up against the European leagues and Japan and the US. So I just don't know why they're doing this, and it's sort of disappointing that they're trying to play it out so publicly, because I just don't think that ever really ends very well.
Harry, do you agree with the general sentiment in terms of some of the figures that were talked about were how there's an imbalance within the broadcast revenue between RA and New Zealand Rugby, with New Zealand Rugby receiving $89 million per year from Sky. RA only gets $33 million a year with Nine and Stan. With that as the basis of the comments that were being made, do you kind of sympathise with what McLennan was putting out there?
I think McLennan was hoping for a Johnny Depp, Amber Heard level scene playing out in public. So, any publicity is good publicity. So I can only assume that's what he was targeting. But to be honest with you, I think New Zealand has been very difficult to work with for a long period of time. So I can understand their frustration. And I think they feel like they've just been batting their heads against the wall for year after year and not making much headway. So I can understand why he's decided to do it. And personally, I'm happy to have someone standing up for us. I don't necessarily think we are going to go away from them. But to be honest, I think Matt won't agree with me, but I wouldn't mind if they did have a go as well. I just think the model right now isn't the right model for Australia. I can understand that we need a few teams playing together, but the market isn't really being captured with what Australia is being offered at the moment. And back when we had the Tri-Nations, you had South Africa, New Zealand, and you had Australia. The biggest funds were coming in from the South Africa media deal, and yet we were roughly getting a third each.
Exactly a third. They changed it to exactly a third.
It was exactly a third.
The history of that was a third, because we got, when we had three teams in 96, we were getting, I think, 21%. And over time, once they got to, when the Rebels came in, you had Super 15, three, every country had an even number, so they get a fair split. And that held up until COVID, when obviously now,
when New Zealand, that held up until New Zealand were getting paid more.
Well, we lost, I think, $20 million or so. Is that right, Matt?
We lost, yeah, I mean, whatever was taken out in 2020, they were able to play to the end of that broadcast deal. But then, I guess this is the point, is that what I'm sort of saying is that we can only blame ourselves that our product has devalued in the last decade. We can't blame New Zealand. And granted, the old deal was a partnership arrangement, but that was based on an even number of teams. I guess all the test matches that were built into that. Once COVID came along, it did seem as though every country was trying their own thing. The South Africans decided to leave. New Zealand were testing the waters with their own domestic comp. And it seemed as though both countries realised we can't do this alone. We need to work together. But obviously the Kiwis didn't want 5 Australian teams. And I got to ask, you got to say, guys, are we proving them wrong at the moment? If you go through the last few years, there's a fair point to say, look, you guys need to either get 5 good teams or you need to start considering reducing the number of teams that play in this competition.
For a little while, I had the same thought process, but now I'm completely on the opposite of that. You know, Australian rugby cannot shrink to grow into the future. We have this golden opportunity with lots of money coming in through the Lions, lots of eyeballs, lots of money coming in through the World Cup, and a lot more eyeballs coming in through that period of time. I don't buy that we don't have the talent here to have a couple more teams. Yes, I know it's a different discussion when we talk about cohesion and how that affects the Wallabies, but I just don't buy it because I watch rugby league regularly and most of the players, honestly, they actually pretty crappy footy players. They have a couple key special players in every single team and the other guys just work hard.
But they're not competing against other crappy teams. They're competing against the Kiwi sides. And they have 23
But see, this is what I'm saying. In a domestic comp, it is different. We showed that there's definitely an appetite for domestic comp through Super Rugby AU, and people love to throw out, it was during COVID, people were at home watching, sport and just want to watch sport. I don't buy it because, I didn't watch any other sport throughout that period of time. People just actually connected to a competition where there was going to be an Aussie winner. We saw Aussie sides each week, and people bought into it. No one wants to see you losing.
We've fallen into this. Yeah, I agree, but and look, I think we've fallen into this trap before where we've said we're going to go and do something or we're going to expand or we're going to try and create something new without fully knowing what the market actually is going to give us. And to go into a domestic competition now based on how many teams, whoever those teams would be, without thinking it through, without having a plan and publicly saying it via journalists, I just think it just kind of reeks of hubris. And I just don't think it's a smart move. And yes, we want to try and keep 5 teams. We don't want to shrink. But if we want to do that, then we've got to put some thought into that third tier. And that should be where the focus is, not going back and tug of war with New Zealand.
And that raises a really good point of questions, which I think is kind of where this conversation is going. And I deliberately set that up because I knew that Nelson and Matt had wildly divergent opinions on that.
Can I say one quick thing before we
I don't know if we're wildly divergent. I think we all want the same thing, and we sort of broadly agree on the end point. This is the classic case of Australian rugby. Everyone's got a different strategy as to how to get to that end point. And
it's like somebody should make a documentary about this.
Yeah, that would be good. Hopefully people would watch it.
Mitch, you wanted to jump in, mate?
I just wanted to say before we moved on to the next point and talking about what would be the best model for Australian rugby, I think there's 2 points really that needs to be highlighted. First of all, this was broken by Fox Sports, by Christy Doran. So I don't know if there's, obviously Hamish McLennan had sat down and had conversations with him, but the timing around that is very much suspect of getting that exclusive out in the same week as the Super Rugby final. So I think there's a little bit of gamemanship there by Fox Sports. The second point is, when you actually read the article, Hamish McLennan doesn't specifically say this is what we want to do. He's just using this as an opportunity to say the relationship between New Zealand rugby and Australian rugby hasn't been great over the last few years. They're getting a much bigger piece of the pie currently than what Australia is. He's just saying that we need to start thinking what works best for us in terms of a commercial prospect. And what he was saying in this, he doesn't necessarily say we want to have to go and do a domestic competition. We want to have an agreement with New Zealand Rugby. And what he even said in that article is that when they were negotiating Super Rugby Pacific, Rugby Australia wanted a 5-year deal and New Zealand said, no, we want 2. And even now they've been trying to talk about what the plan is for 2024 post next year. And Australian Rugby wants their plans made. They want to know what's happening so they can promote it. New Zealand Rugby hasn't come to the table yet and started those negotiations. So I think that's where he's coming from in that regard.
You do wonder if that 2-year deal was geared around, obviously, the World Cup, but also their Silver Lake private equity deal, which is a massive thing. Like, that's a lot of money, and that is going to determine a lot of things. And if private equity are trying to acquire it, they want to acquire it cleanly without having to sort of take on other deals that they're locked into that they may not necessarily agree with. And I feel like that's the thing that, and Hamish McLennan should know, he's from a private equity media background. He should know that those guys aren't going to mess around. If they invest in it and they say, hey, we want you guys to have less than 5 teams, well, they're going to put their money down to do that. And if New Zealand Rugby wanted to walk away with Moana Pasifika and the Jura, they could. They've got the money to bankroll them and take over the bill that Australia is putting into helping the Fijian Flyers. All they need is one more team, and they've got a nice 8-team competition. And which team in Australia has the ability to leave and do their own thing? The Force.
Well, guess what? In my opinion,
this could end very, very badly if they basically say stupid things and keep doing what they're doing.
I honestly, I appreciate what you're coming from, but I don't buy it. I mean, Fiji and Drua have been bankrolled by us, supported by us right from the beginning, not by New Zealand. Yes, New Zealand.
Partly us and World Rugby. We chip in a bit.
But I mean, we brought
them the change that was spent the last how many years trying to support them
and brought them into the NRC and have done actually a far more than New Zealand ever have even thought about for Fiji rugby.
But money talks, and if we don't have the cash,
money does,
and we won't have the cash.
Money does talk, but how secure would they feel if New Zealand Rugby, who are getting all their decisions made by a private investor, next minute say, you know what, Fiji aren't that entertaining, or Fiji have to play all their games in New Zealand now, or they wouldn't feel secure by a business model that is all about doing whatever suits them and pushing everyone else around. I don't think that is a secure place to work.
I don't think they're going to be sort of suggesting they play all their games in New Zealand. I just think at the end of the day, you're going against, but they don't have the infrastructure yet to have the games that Fijian have. Maybe that'll happen in the next couple of years, and maybe that would happen if you've got a New Zealand comp that's well funded backing you. But this is why I scratch my head, because I just don't know. But what high ground does Australian rugby, other than a future windfall, to have and start making these sorts of demands on when our teams are not performing well enough.
Rugby Australia is kind of in the box seat here because we've shown that we can go and do our own domestic competition. The AFL and the NRL are going gangbusters in Australia. We could do that and be all right.
They're apples and oranges and pears. You can't compare.
We don't need
contained indigenous competitions with a global competition that relies on international teams.
I mean, we're talking about two different things then if we're talking about success of the Wallabies. But all I'm saying is if we moved away from New Zealand, we've shown through rugby, Super Rugby AU, that we had a product that succeeded and survived in that own little ecosystem. We could do it.
I'm talking about Super Rugby too, man. No one in the UK.
Yeah.
Sorry, you finish.
I was just going to say, if New Zealand Rugby turned around and said, we don't want Australian rugby at all, we could go and do our own thing. And I think we will be quite successful in that because we've seen through the other sports that in Australia, the Australian sporting fan doesn't really give a crap about the New Zealand teams. They don't want to see the Waratahs play the Hurricanes. When you go to the Waratahs and Hurricanes game, it's Hurricanes fans that are there showing up. It's not Waratahs fans who are there. When you go to a Waratahs and Reds game, Waratahs fans will go because they want to see the Waratahs beat the Reds. They don't really care about the Hurricanes. So I think that we could do that in our own little ecosystem. We don't necessarily need New Zealand rugby. If they pulled away from us, though, who are they going to play?
We do, as I said, I reckon they will go after Moana Pasifika. They'll go after the draw, and they'll put expressions of interest to get. They'll either create a third Pacific team, or they'll put expressions of interest for clubs to come in.
Don't reckon they have it when their third tier's gone down dramatically. So.
Yeah, maybe, but if we think that anyone around the world is going to be remotely interested in Australian domestic competition, in the words of the castle, we're dreaming.
Look at the money and that is now. We're not getting the money from huge overseas. I was going to say, our broadcast revenue will go up because we have more domestic games. We have domestic partners, broadcasting partners that would be happier. And it will be a more entertaining competition. I think our money will definitely increase.
The TV ratings will chalk and cheese.
Do we get money?
That's assuming that people will start wanting to watch it at a much higher rate.
But they did when we did it last year.
That was domestic that people were watching it more than from it.
I think to work off one season and a few games, and base your decisions on one season and especially during a very unusual period.
But we're working off 25 years of failure with Super Rugby currently. We haven't grown. We've gone backwards in performance. Yeah. We've gone backwards in terms of revenue.
The product shrunk.
Ability to hold players. Yeah. We haven't grown. We're not going anywhere forward, except we've got some good depth coming through in the last couple of years. That's our one positive.
All right, I'm going to jump in here, guys, because we're having really good conversation around what this could look like moving forward.
This is what we're here for,
and it's good. It's great. It's genuine. Yeah, good rumble where we all have slightly divergent opinions. Wait, let me talk. Where we've got slightly diverging opinions, where we're all aiming, like Matt was saying, for what we think is a good direction for Australian rugby moving forward, and it's great to have these ideas out there. So knowing that in 2023, we have the current iteration of Super Rugby Pacific, and then in 2024, there's a little bit of potential for change. It may well be another shorter term, maybe 2-year extension of the current arrangement to take us through till maybe the end of 2025, end of the Lions tour, who knows. But in any case, what I'd like us to do is to go around and for people just to give almost like a 1-minute elevator pitch of what they would be hoping for of a competition moving forward. Now, my rules for this are there is no interjections or critique. It is simply, this is what I think a good direction for Australian rugby is moving forward. And this is my quick reason why. Okay, so knowing that we've just had a bit of a unpacking of some of the different complexities and challenges of domestic, international competitions, broadcast engagements, all that jazz. Harry, can we start with you, please? What are you thinking the competition should look like 2024 and onwards?
I think we need a mainstay Australian competition that fans can get behind. I think the only way fans will be reliably going to get behind the competition is if we use the existing Super Rugby sides. I think they obviously need to get that up to probably 8 to 10 teams if that's what they're going to do. But then I would never want to abandon New Zealand rugby and the rest of the islands as well. I would love some sort of championship cup on the back of that. My worry is that if we have 8 Australian teams, we're going to get torched by the Kiwi sides every year. So potentially we can bring up a level, turn Super Rugby AU into the third tier and maybe put 2 or 3 teams into a short knockout tournament in the back end that helps build a bit of cohesion for the Wallabies. That's probably where my head's at now.
Yeah, cool ideas. Mitch?
Go with Nelson. I think my idea is very similar to his one, so I don't want to steal his thunder.
All right, Nelson, thunder away.
Very. I mean, I think we're pretty much in the same sort of time. Yeah, I think you have to have a domestic winner in Australia, and I think it did wonders for us last year. Eyeballs and talk through the media. So I think we have to have a winner in an Australian competition, and I think that means right now it's probably the 5 Aussie teams. It's Fiji and Drua, and it might be another 2 teams brought in or built through New South Wales and Queensland. Play everyone twice, then you do a semi and your final, and then I think we have a Super Rugby Pacific Champions Cup, and I think that means X amount of teams from Australia, X amount of teams from Japan, X amount of teams from New Zealand and the Pacific come together in almost a mini World Cup structure. You've got 3 team pools, you play each one once or twice, depending how many games you want to make out of the year, and then you funnel through. So you bring in lots of revenue from a very exciting competition with no boring games. We still have crossover with Kiwis, but you're not having to play necessarily as many, so you're not getting beaten down repetitively by Kiwis, and we get a domestic winner. So I think it's all the things we need.
All right, Mitch?
Yeah, mine's very similar to that idea of having this sort of champions tournament at the end of the season so that we still have our Rugby AU component where we get that domestic winner, but then we don't need to see the Force or the Rebels go up against the Crusaders because realistically, who needs to see a 60-point drumming? That's not doing anything for the players. That's not doing anything for the product or the game. So if we put 2 or 3 teams, the top 2 or 3 teams from that domestic competition into that Champions Cup tournament, I think that would be really exciting for the fans, but also really exciting for the players because we still have that crossover element. We still have to face the Kiwis, but we're not necessarily getting our lower teams that aren't. Like if we look at the Force this year, they haven't got a lot of representation from the Wallabies. If you're looking at a team like the Brumbies or the Reds, we've got so much more representation there. even the Waratahs. So those three teams and the Brumbies would you theoretically on paper they should push the Kiwis a lot more, and it's probably a more even competition in that regard.
Matt?
Super Rugby Pacific, drop an Australian team. The team would be dropped would be the Rebels. That gives you an 11-team competition, 2 rounds, which is 20 rounds. The Rebels would then move down to a third-tier semi-professional competition, 8 teams. The Vikings from Canberra, Perth Spirit, Gold, whatever they want to call themselves, and the Rebels, and then 5 teams from probably 3 from New South Wales, 2 from Queensland. They're all feeders to the Super Rugby 4 teams atop. And those teams from New South Wales and Queensland could either be the old NRC teams. I know the Rams are I've got talking to 2 fans from the Rams, or you could go to some of the bigger, more established clubs that have both commercial backing, infrastructure, clubs like Sydney Uni, Gordon, and see if they want to basically create a super team on top of their existing club. And that would play underneath Super Rugby. You could probably play it an overlap. So you have weeks where you're watching, Super Rugby matches and also Super Rugby AU or national club competition, whatever you want to call it. And it basically allows guys to filter down and below. I think you've got enough opportunities for people to watch both New South Wales and one of these clubs. It would take time, but like anything, we've just got to kind of choose something and stick with it and not keep changing every 2 or 3 years.
Yep. Yeah, cool.
Sorry, and the reason I keep the force in is because they're privately owned, so it'll be less of a financial strain on RA.
Yep. No, that's a really good point. Love the background. That's tough right in there. How good. So, by the way, for anybody audio, we've got the Dales, the Nelsons, changing their backgrounds to fit the topic that is currently in play. That's awesome. So for me, I actually really like both of the options that have been put forward. And like Matt finished his comment with there, I wouldn't actually be too fussed as long as it was a pick and stick model. You have one,
or
you have really good, pick and drive model. You have one. You conduct a large amount of both kind of research into organizational structures and all that cohesion stuff that Penny Darwin loves to chat about. And then you look into what the market is willing to be paying for these different options, and then you just stick with it for the next 10 years. And that is the model we choose going forward. No more chopping and changing.
And I think
there's a point there I've got to just make about cohesion. I think this idea that cohesion can be quickly gained in half a season or so, that's true. But the best results come from 5, 6, 10 years of a system that just hasn't been meddled with. And when you look at the most cohesive teams and clubs around the world, Ireland, with Leinster, the Crusaders, there has not been much deviation at all in their systems. And that's allowed them to build and build, so that they have not just one good, solid golden class, but they have great people coming through into a system. Australia, other than maybe the Brumbies, we haven't had a great system whereby guys come in and, it's nice and solid. There's just been so much chopping and changing with our NAC, ARC, the disruption with the Super Rugby calendars that, for me, for the next 10 years with the World Cup and beyond the World Cup, all I want is for them to put in something that's a system that doesn't then have to change, and that goes towards creating, cohesive clubs that are going to be consistent. Don't have to win every year, just play consistent. It'd be nice to have Australian teams consistently in the top half of the table for the next 5 years.
I was just going to say, if we stick to the current format of Super Rugby Pacific moving forward, I'd love to see that idea that you brought up on our pod a few weeks ago, Ando, of the trophy and plate or whatever they call it. So top half the comp plays for one thing, second half or bottom half plays for something else, just so it keeps something alive. Or if not even that model, just something kind of like the, what did they used to call it? The Horan Little Shield in the NRC, or the Rand Furley Shield in New Zealand that cycles through and just makes some of those games a little bit more exciting and a bit more fan engagement.
Well, I think it is time for us to move on to the question around the Wallabies, because we've been talking for a long time now about what Australian rugby could look like moving forward. It's great to consider the hypotheticals of what future rugby could be, but what this really draws us into is, what do we want for the Wallabies team moving forward, really? And it asks us a big questions around the shape of Super Rugby, whether we want domestic success or whether we're looking for international success on a broader stage. Do we want the Wallabies to be the best team in the world, or do we want a successful domestic competition with heaps of fans and great engagement turning up each week? Harry, what are you thinking about this?
I just think it's going to be really hard to do both, to be honest with you. Personally, living in Australia, I want more people interested in the game, and I see that, and I think that if we have enough of a backing and enough of a fan base, enough money, then it means that we are more competitive with the other major codes in Australia, and that means that we can get more top level talent playing our game instead of rugby league. So I feel like that's the only way that we can eventually have both. So for me, I want domestic success and a domestic competition that fans love, and our ratings go through the roof first.
That would be exciting. I'd love to be kind of top of the ratings week in, week out. Let's move on to the Wallabies. We've had the Wallabies squad been announced. Ned Hannigan's been brought into the extended squad with an injury to Jed Holloway. So everything is right in the world with Hannigan being back in the Wallabies. And we have a match coming up this weekend in Perth against England. The first of the 3-match series. It's going to be one of the biggest series on Australian shores in a long time. So we're going to go through and preview this upcoming game. Now, what I want us to start with is just a really basic talk around the team. We've actually gone through and suggested our own team for our own 23 for the weekend. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read it out, and then I don't believe, Matt, you had any input into the creation of this team. So because the rest of us were chatting through it, then I want to hear, do you agree with us? Who would you be swapping in? Basically, we want to hear your criticisms and critiques, if required, or your ardent and fervent praise about our genius. So feel free to choose either one. Basically,
I'm either going to be Alan Jones or Nick McArdle. We'll see which one I am.
Mate, please be Nick McArdle. Please don't ever be Alan Jones. So we're going to go front row of Bell, Parecki, and Ala Alatoa. Then Swain and Phillip in the engine, with Valentini, Hooper, and Wilson as our back row combo. We move then into... Actually, let's start with the forward pack, and I'll go the bench forwards as well, with Fainga'a, Sio, Slipper, Frost, and Samu on the bench. Personally, I wanted to take Frost out and put Hannigan in, but I got shouted down. So that's our forward pack. And what do you think of that so far?
Sorry, you give me that bench again?
It was Fainga'a, Sio, Slipper, Frost, Samu.
Samu, yeah. That is very, very close to, I think, the team that I mentioned in our chat. In terms of the starting 8, I had Alatoa, might have had Alatoa and Sio slipped. I think I started Sio as a starter, but it was pretty much the same. I mean, the back line, that back row, I think is solid against any team in the world. Wilson, Hooper, and Valentini. Locks is also, it's hard, but I think you've got to go with guys that have proven at international level. So Phillip and Swain for me. Mate, Parecki's had a great season. Now, let's face it. Hooker, I think, is still up for grabs. I might have to. I won't. I'll leave my controversy. I'm probably giving away my controversial Wallaby pick for next year to replace our Hooker troubles. But like Hooker troubles, he's had a good year, so I think he certainly deserves a start. But right. It's a pretty solid choice.
Moving on to the backline then. White at 9, Quade Cooper at 10, Corin Bette at 11, Karevi at 12, 13 is Ikitau, 14 Kellaway, and 15 is Banks, with McDermott, James O'Connor, and Pataya on the bench.
Why is Banks in the team? I've got to ask.
Because he's the best fullback in Australian rugby this season.
But he's not going to be available next year. If now's the time to try Kellaway or Pataya at fullback, I'd say that.
Or James O'Connor.
Or James O'Connor, as recent comments have put out there.
I think that's where the question arises then. Is it like, do you go with Banks thinking that he's maybe our best chance to win this series? Or do you go with someone like Pataya thinking that, that's what we're going to need for the Rugby World Cup, and he could be the guy there next year? It's not going to be James O'Connor at fullback next year. Surely not. Craig Cooper's, I'd put my money on it, is not going to be starting finals. Yeah, Craig Cooper will not be starting finals next year in the World Cup.
I would suggest Bill is going to be in that squad next season. And I did actually wonder whether he would be one of the overseas picks, or whether they could pick him whether they could pick him outright because he's already signed for New South Wales.
He could.
He's injured. Yeah,
he's injured. Right. That's why. But he might be ready. He might be good come the rugby champs. I heard a whisper.
Yeah. But no, look, perhaps there's a bit of Rennie trying to pick the team that's going to win in the series. I can get that. And Banks is certainly the perennial Banks thing, right? He plays really well every year in Super Rugby and then just doesn't quite have that same impact, I think, overall when he plays for the Wallabies. But, mate, maybe this could be the year he bucks the trend.
Can I ask a question to all you guys? What does it mean? What does it mean for Australia if we lose this series? I personally feel like the pressure's on Eddie Jones and England to win this series, and if they don't, then he's seriously looking at potentially being replaced.
I think.
But is there as big a pressure on Australia to win?
I think there's two ways it can go for Rennie. I think Rennie can go all out to win this series, and if he loses it, it looks bad, and then we're up in the air about who do we pick for the Rugby World Cup. If he's picking Banks and things at fullback, and we don't succeed, I think that's a failure. But if he ends up going, I'm going to build for the World Cup, I'm putting Pataya there, he gets a little bit more leeway. I still think you need at least one win, and then no games can get away from us. I really think we should be expecting 2 wins. But I think there is that approach. Eddie Jones is very well known for building for a World Cup. So if we're trying to win this series and we don't win it, I think that's a bad look.
I just think we need to start to make continue, I should say, to make some steps in the right direction. And we would want to be very competitive if we lost. Having said that, I feel like this debate is about if we're worrying about the World Cup or this series hinging on if we pick Banks or not, which might be too much importance put on one position. We can build cohesion with the other 14 or 22 men in the matchday squad and then still bring Pataya in later through the year. And still see plenty of benefits to our side. So I think maybe it's not as important as we might be playing it up.
Hey, Rennie might pick him next year. He might pick Banks from Japan.
He's definitely won't. No.
I don't. Look, obviously, neither coach wants to lose, but I actually think they both can afford to lose. I don't think their job's on the line because exactly as Nelson said, Eddie's a fairly cunning master at these sorts of things. He would have spoken to the RFU and laid out his 4-year plan, and maybe there's been a few blips on the way. And I think Rennie's certainly got and should have the flexibility to try and build towards next year. Mate, if this year's an utter disaster and they don't get nowhere in the World Cup, maybe review. But as I've always said about coaches, maybe they need to review other things and not pin everything on the coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you guys go through and watch the Squidge Rugby analysis of the recent Six Nations season for England Rugby, he is just masterful in the way that he unpacks the attacking patterns and shape that Eddie Jones has been building over the last couple of seasons. And I highly recommend that people go and take a look at that. And what it presents is a real willingness of Eddie Jones to continue to innovate within particularly the attacking shape and different roles of players within a team, which actually speaks to why he's been developing Marcus Smith ahead of somebody that's still a very capable and talented player like George Ford. Everybody sees the highlight reels of Marcus Smith, but he's actually developing at an international level that consistency of gameplay that's matching what Eddie Jones is trying to do. So if we're looking at a general pass mark for Australian rugby, I think personally within this series, I'd be agreeing with what Harry was saying before, with a minimum of a win and keeping all the other games bloody close. But really for a home game with a team that is fairly consistent in terms of the quality that we've had over the last couple of years. England have a couple of injuries coming across, a few positions that are a little bit weaker. I'm not saying that this is going to be an easy win by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm hoping for a win, and I don't think I'm being completely unrealistic in hoping for that too.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think if you looked at that series in isolation, agree, you want to win. But I think, as I mentioned to you guys offline, I'm looking at this whole year as a build-up. If we lost the series, say 2-1, I mean 3-0 loss like last 2016 would be an utter disaster. But if we lost it narrowly 2-1, but then we built and got better through the year and won 4 out of 5 tour games. For me, that's a massive pass, because that shows that we can get better with more games under our belt. We can build, and we can play well away from Australia. You know, we got to start winning games confidently outside of Suncorp. When we start doing that, you know, then I think we can really be confident that we can go to France next year and take on anyone, because we know we can beat any team in the world on our day. But it's just that consistency that we haven't shown for a long time.
We also haven't shown yet that we can win outside of Queensland. So that might help, because we play the second test in Queensland, and then this weekend's in Perth. So it'll be interesting to see how we go over there, and if we can. Well,
our Perth record was good until we started playing Bledisloe Cups there. We had a pretty good record prior to that.
Till we started talking about it, mate. So you just got to not talk about your good record, and then it'll be fine. Now, Rev, in his absence, has sent through a couple of things which are really interesting for us to be discussing when we're talking about the Wallabies. And he puts forward, it's worthwhile noting that in our last home series, we only used 27 of the 39 players in the squad. So could we take a look at which positions are most likely to get a switch up, or who may miss out? So I've got the Wallabies squad up in front of me here. Maybe you guys, whilst I'm stalling, can have an opportunity on your devices to get the full 30 or so Wallabies squad up and see if there's a player that you can highlight that you don't think is going to be getting game time at in this coming 3-match series. And I'm going to start things off, and I am going to suggest that Caden Neville, outside of injury, is not going to be getting a run at this level. Do we agree? Do we disagree? Who else do you think?
Completely agree.
Yep.
Can I jump in with the obvious one?
Yeah.
Are we still talking about this? I was going to say Sam Talakai shouldn't be anywhere near a Wallaby squad.
Yeah, he's a late. For people who don't know, he's a late injury call-up for Harry Johnson-Holmes, who did his Achilles. So thoughts go out to Harry. He had a
Do we know
season.
where that sits? Because Harry Johnson-Holmes was technically selected in Australia A, but was training with the Wallabies because Tupou wasn't ready.
Yep.
So is Sam Talakai now training with the Wallabies and in the Wallabies, or from social media it looks like he's in Brisbane with the
he was in the main squad
in Queensland. So
I think it's I feel like he's filling a void there in the short term, but not going to be playing, kind of thing. Like they don't want to just necessarily rush someone out of Australia A if Tupou's going to be playing next week. And
I think it's pretty easy to say that all the late call-ups aren't going to get game time. Let's be honest.
That's pretty hurtful. I just want you to be careful with the words you say about our Lord and Saviour Ned Hannigan. But when another player that I don't think is going to see game time, as much as I would love for it to happen, is Izzy Parisi, unless we see an injury to one of our existing outside centres. I don't think he should be placed on the wing. I feel like he's played the entire season for the last 2 years at 13. Keep him there. That's my read on that. Anybody feel like he's going to get time?
I think we could see him get a bit of a crack. I think we would have seen him a little bit earlier throughout the year last year, and a few more opportunities, despite I think he had a few injuries as well. But I think he's potentially a very good 23 jersey for the Wallabies. Can cover the outside centre, can cover the wing. And I think he is, this kind of foil between what we have with Ikitau in terms of, being a good attacker, although he wasn't as good this year, and Paisami, who's this, can make a big hit, but also be a liability sometimes in defence. I think Parisi this year showed that he had the good attack, the good defence, and he actually had, that in-between ground between the two of them where they're both sort of lacking something. And I think for that reason, we will get to see him have a crack, and it will probably be on a 23 jersey for mine.
Yep, completely fair enough. All right, a couple more players that we think maybe won't be getting much game time. I'll shove out there Noah Lolasiu. I'm not sure if he's going to crack the starting team with James O'Connor supposedly returning back to fitness and Quade Cooper being one of the 3 overseas players. So,
I guess the question with that selection comes down to whether Rennie views James O'Connor as a fullback option or not.
Which, if he does, I don't understand that. He doesn't have the pace in my mind. He doesn't have the aerial ability, and he hasn't played at fullback. He didn't play there
4 years.
Longer than that. He's been in Queensland for the last couple of years, and he was at Sale for a couple of years before that, where he was playing 13. So yeah, I don't see the logic within that supposed position.
Should the third game be a dead rubber? Either way, you do wonder whether they'll actually do something radical, like play, Jock 10 and Lolosio at 12, or put Quade Cooper in, and just mix it up.
Can I pick my dead rubber back line?
Yeah, go.
So you start Tate, then
give Jake the run, mate.
Gordon can come bench, and then we go. I'll let James O'Connor have the crack at 10. I don't want to rush Tate Edmund in too quick. Then on the wings, we've got Vunivalu and Pataya. In the centres, we've got Karevi and Parisi. Let's push Pataya back to fullback, and Korobidi on the other wing. So we've got Korobidi, Pataya, Parisi, Vunivalu, Karevi. Like, that is some strike power, and you're only going to do
that. Could be the first test backline.
You're looking for like a 50 to 51 match, I reckon, with that backline.
They'll score 100, but it depends on how many tries they let in.
It depends on how many times they're required to kick as well.
I want to know whether Vunivalu had some contractual piece in there that he has to be in the Wallaby team, because he should be in Australia A, as far as I'm concerned.
He should be in Australia.
Enough game time. I think it would be great to see him in Australia. I'd love to see him. Don't get me wrong, but I just think it's a bit premature for a guy that hasn't played much Super Rugby.
Yeah, the scary thing about Nelson's hypothetical team is they're going to have to do a 6-2 split on the bench, but it'll be 6 backs. So that way they can roll out the subs when they all pull their hammies.
Very well.
Two po doubles as both back and forward.
All right, we had a question come in from Sheepy, which asks, what is each person's most controversial pick to be included in next year's Rugby World Cup squad? So this is a big one. Looking ahead, based upon some outstanding performances, which we're definitely going to see in this upcoming series, what is your out there pick? If any of you say Ryan Lonergan or Ned Hannigan, that's really going to hurt my heart. So, Mitch, we're going to start with you, then we'll go to Matt straight after.
So the question is outlandish pick.
Controversial picks for the Rugby World Cup squad next year.
Squad. Okay.
Controversial. Israel Folau.
if controversy is the name of the game, then congratulations, you just won.
It's got to be possible, doesn't it? He can't switch back anymore, can he?
He hasn't played for him yet.
He hasn't played yet. So we pick him. Right, okay. We'd have to pick him now. He'd have to be playing for us.
There's a 50-50 chance he gets himself booted, let's be honest. So,
in all seriousness, maybe Lewis Liner.
Oh,
that's a controversial pick. Just pick him so that we keep him and take him out of England's hands.
Did you see what I put up on Twitter?
I did, yeah.
We win the series, we get him. It's simple as that.
I like it.
And if we lose if we draw the series, he's Italian.
Yep.
It does feel like the universe doesn't want him to play for England, I've got to say.
Yeah.
Every time he gets picked, there's a reason why he doesn't make the final team.
Maybe his dad's just in his ear.
No, in Eddie's ear. More like it.
Oh, look, I can tell you confidently, when I spoke to Michael Liner for the documentary, what was that, 2 years ago now, and I asked him about his sons, he said they grew up loving Australia, both of them. So obviously they're attached to England. But yeah, I'm sure that they were probably thinking very hard about which direction they wanted to go in. Hence,
I mean, it does show a lot, doesn't it, that Tom's come out here so young and signed with the Reds.
Absolutely.
And he's the only one of that family so far that's emigrated back. So
that's right. Yeah.
All right, Matt, who's your outlandish pick?
Look, I sort of inferred it a bit before when I was talking about hooker, but it'd have to be Tolu Latu. He comes back next season. He's the bad boy, but everyone loves the bad boy coming good. And I feel that in the current squad, depending on where, I mean, who knows where he lands with the Super Rugby team. It's a guy like Reedy feels like the sort of, the kind of the big uncle that can put an arm around him and try and sort of steer him. Well, he's a good player. He's got natural ability to, it's just a question of, do we want to go down the path of selecting guys who are solid, or, if these top players from overseas are available, like they are, without having to eat into the wild cards, you can't really ignore them. So, if he's obviously got a lot of work to do in his sort of off field, but if he comes back and has a good season next year playing for whoever he plays, it'd be very hard for them to ignore him.
Mate,
surely Dave Rennie's got a no-tool policy.
I think everyone has a no-tool policy, but at the end of the day, every tool could be sharpened. So I mean, you got to.
That is wisdom for the ages. There, I've got this brilliant routine going where my 6-year-old, when I'm giving him bath in the evening, he goes, "Dada, can we watch some rugby?" And I'm like, "Yes, mate. What game do you want to watch?" And he's like, "Oh, can we watch the Waratahs tonight?" I'm like, "Let me roll back to 2014. So we got the final out and we're tracking through. I jumped forward to the 76th minute when, who was it? Stephen Donald got the penalty to take the Crusaders.
McCall.
No. But to kick it over in the 76th minute. Before that, the Crusaders getting the lead. Anyway, who cares? Then the resulting line out that came after the restart of play, Tolu Ladu's just come onto the field replacing Tatafa Porter now, and he just throws the shonkiest line out ever. Not as bad as Richie Asiata's earlier this season, but it just reminded me that Australian rugby has this perennial problem of hookers that just cannot throw. So I just that was a bit of a walk down memory lane of, oh yeah, okay, it's nearly 10 years later and we still have an issue with hookers being able to throw straight. So that's a little bit worrying. Let's go to the Dales. Who are your controversial picks for a Wallaby squad for the Rugby World Cup?
I'll let Harry steal mine. I'm going big Maki Nawaganitawasi. Learn to defend this year, slowly learning to get into the right position. We need a fullback. He's amazing under the high ball. He can finish. I think he's got the talent to make it in the international scene. And he'll be young. Don't get me wrong, I'm probably not starting him. Not next year.
How much has Balumba paid you? This is outrageous.
Mate, he's foreseen it. It's been foretold.
He's seeing it. He's getting paid in Sydney University physio contracts or something like that, I think. But let's go, Nels.
Look, I'm just going to strongly disagree with Harry because that was mine and he stole it. So I'm going to go Isaac Lucas. Versatile weapon that I really just want to have seen get a chance in the Wallabies.
And it's a big call to pick one of your 3 international picks as an outside chance of the squad.
But I honestly, Quade's going to be too old. We're going to have good locks.
So it's going to be like, sorry, Arnold.
No.
Sorry, Corin Betty, we're taking Lucas.
He's going to sign back in Australia.
No, he's not. He's got a 2-year contract.
Mate, he's going to sign after that, and it doesn't matter. So he's going to sign back in Australia, and he will. Everyone's going to get injured, but he's going to come on and score the match-winning try and convert it in the grand final.
I have a feeling if you sign towards the back end of next season, you'll then qualify. You then you can be qualified. So guys, there's a bunch of players that could qualify as of June next year or whatever it is.
I think Nick White played a full season overseas, still signed for Australia the following year, last World Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah. Correct, yeah. And then as soon as the premiership finished, he came back for this time, this part of the kind of international season in the mid-year, then in the lead up to all the following international games later in August and stuff. All right, team. My player is Ryan Ornigan because he'll creep into the kind of 32-man squad then as that third choice.
So who's you replace?
Why am I not surprised?
That's the rule, right?
Who does he replace? Pretty easily, Tate McDermott. Well, you got to have Jake Gordon in there, obviously.
Have you been down at Moore Park smoking the same drugs as Hamish McLennan, Ando?
I can only dream of breathing the same rarefied air that he inhaled. I don't know if that's.
You should actually go down. I'm sure they'll let you guys in the building. I might be on the blacklist these days.
On that news, Mitch, do you want to say your happy news about what's happening in 2 weeks' time?
Yeah, so we have sorted out media accreditation for the England series, which is very exciting for Pick and Drive. So I'll be heading to Brisbane hopefully next weekend. We're not going to Perth this weekend because we can't justify
haven't got enough coffee donations. So ko-fi.com/pick-and-drive-rugby.
Yeah, so I'll be heading to Brisbane next weekend, attending the press conference. Very scared that Eddie Jones will literally eat me, but it will be fun. So we'll be able to ask your questions, our fans' questions to the coaching staff and the players.
Fantastic.
And then we've got it for Sydney as well, so we didn't have to fork out a new mortgage to get a ticket.
Exactly. So we'll both be at the SCG match, which is pretty fun. So guys, that actually brings us to the end of the show and the end of the Rumble. That has been a load of fun. I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to chat all things Aussie rugby, to get into the nitty and gritty about the challenges that Australian rugby has moving forward. Because as much as we all love Australian rugby, there are many question marks over what it looks like moving forward. And so it's good to be able to hash a few of those out. I don't think we came to any answers, but we definitely asked a lot of great questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. To all of you here, to the Dales, to Matt, to Mitch, it's been an absolute pleasure. Sorry that Rev wasn't able to make it. Gentlemen, thank you so much and have a great week.
Up the Rams.
Thanks, guys.